Is the new main event for UFC 294 between Islam Makhachev and late replacement Alexander Volkanovski a lose-lose situation for both fighters? That is what I'm going to discuss in today's video. My name is James Lynch. Let's get into it. So a bit of a shocker. We saw this last night with Islam getting a new opponent in Alex Volkanovski. A cut now, we know, taking Charles Oliveira out of the fight. I will do an early look preview on this fight, by the way, maybe today, tomorrow, depending on when I get some time, because I do want to go and dig into this one a little bit more here. But let's first talk about the positives of this fight being put together, because I know how people are. They're going to call me negative, and I think there's a couple things to unpack here when it comes to the fight. So the first thing I would say is the positives for sure are that Islam is still on this card. You know, you can't have an Abu Dhabi card without Islam Makhachev. The whole reason that it's taken so long for Islam to get a fight since his last one is because they wanted him to headline this card. It's in Abu Dhabi. It's going to be a pro-Muslim crowd. You need to have Islam headlining this event. You can't really risk having a Chimaev or something, you know, someone like that, you know, headlining the card instead, in my opinion. To me, Islam, he's a, you know, title holder. You had to have him headline this event. So that's the first thing out of the way. The second thing is, this is a better fight than Islam and Charles. It really is. If you saw the first fight with Islam Makhachev and Charles Oliveira, it wasn't close. Islam dominated Charles Oliveira. There was at no point in the fight where Islam was in any sort of danger. At least with the Alex Volkanovski fight, it was close. I know a lot of Islam fans will say, hey, it was 4-1 and all this different stuff. It was. I mean, Islam won the fight. I'm not one of these people that is sitting here saying that Alexander Volkanovski got robbed. But even the biggest Islam Makhachev fan has to know it was a lot closer than people thought it was going to be. Going in, there was a lot of people saying Islam was going to destroy Volkanovski. He was going to finish him. Neither of those things happened. It was a very close fight that went to the judges' scorecards, and they did give the win to Islam Makhachev. The other thing that people have been talking about is that Mateusz Gamrot is going to be getting, or kind of got snubbed for this opportunity, right? If you remember, let me just look him up here, just so we have him on screen. We know that he was going to be the backup for Islam and Charles, and if you look at his record there, 23-2, it definitely makes sense. But you know, kind of looking back, he got a really weird win over Fiziev in the sense that there was an injury in that fight, and it's not like a fight. It's not like that in that fight. It's not like Gamrot, like, you know, went and actually injured him. Fiziev, you know, kind of injured himself. It was kind of a weird fight. I mean, I'm not taking too much away from that win over Fiziev, but it was kind of a weird victory. And then the fight before that was a fight against Jalen Turner, which some people felt like he didn't win. So listen, I'm a fan of Gamrot. I'm not trying to discredit him here, but you know, was he worthy enough to even get a backup spot? I think that's debatable. It would have been a fresh matchup, but let's be honest here. Alex Volkanovski and Islam's a much bigger fight, with the fact that Volkanovski is had the close fight with Islam the first time, and he's also the featherweight champion as well. The other thing that's a positive, if you're a fan of Charles Oliveira, is it kind of delays his, you know, his stay in the 155 division. I mean, if Charles went out there and lost, like I think was likely going to happen at UFC 294, then Charles Oliveira is basically screwed, because, you know, then he's in this limbo that, you know, Max Holloway and Robert Whittaker have been in for so many years, where you've lost now twice to the champion. So if you are an Oliveira fan, this is good for you in the sense that, hey, it delays things a little bit more. Although saying that, maybe he never gets a title shot again. I don't know. We'll see. But I think, you know, to a certain degree, Charles is at his best at 155. I don't like him going down to 145, and I think he's too small for 170. So if you're a fan of Oliveira, this is good news as well, delaying things a little bit more. Now let's get to the negatives, and one of the reasons why I titled this video, this could be a lose-lose situation for both fighters. I know this is kind of obvious, but I got to mention it anyways. This is a huge fight. This is a really huge fight. This is one of the biggest fights in UFC history. When have we seen a current champion, someone that is holding the belt, in the case of Volkanovski, move up and fight the current champion in another weight class? It doesn't happen that often. They already had the first fight. We know this. And it was close. And it was a great fight. And the fact that this is happening on 10 days notice is a huge negative for me. This is one of the biggest fights, like I said, in UFC history. It deserves proper promotion. It feels like the UFC is kind of rushing this thing, which sucks, because this definitely, like, I think everyone had it in their head, hey, Islam beats Charles, maybe he fights Justin, maybe Volk fights Topuria, and then if the timing works out, we can get this next year. This fight already happened this year, right? Like, we're already getting the rematch with one of the greatest fights in UFC history happening again in the same calendar year. It's crazy to me. So that's a big negative for me here, is that they were given this gift in the sense that people didn't think the Islam and Volk fight was going to be close going in. And now you've got this idea of, you know, we're just going to put this together and make it happen. And now if Volk loses, he may never get to fight Islam again if he loses again. In fact, there's probably a strong argument for that. Why would he? I mean, we'll see how the fight plays out. But if he loses here, chances of him fighting Islam again are probably out of the door. Then let's talk about the obvious stuff. If Islam beats Volkanovski, the Volkanovski fans, I'm not going to say haters, Volkanovski fans, will then claim that, well, Volk had surgery on his hand a couple months ago. Volk had to travel to Abu Dhabi, and Volk had to take this fight on 10 days notice against Islam Makhachev, one of the best fighters in the world. So they will discredit Islam's win. You know there's going to be people that say that. On the flip side, if Volkanovski wins, and again, these are not Volkanovski haters, these are Islam fans. You know Islam fans are going to say, well, he had an opponent switch up in 10 days. It's not his fault. He was preparing for Oliveira. Volkanovski came in. I mean, Islam had, I mean, if you think about it, and I know Lucas Tracy did a video on this as well, talking about how this destroys Volkanovski's legacy. I don't really agree with that, because Volk at 145, what he does at 145 is irrelevant what he does elsewhere, in my opinion. I mean, maybe his overall legacy and him being the greatest ever, but it doesn't hurt his legacy at 145 if he's moving up and he loses this fight. To me, it's not a huge deal as far as my opinion goes, but kind of what I'm getting at here is that you will see if, Volk wins, there will be Islam fans saying that, well, it wasn't fair. He got the opponent switch up on 10 days, and Volk really had nothing to lose because it's not his weight class. He fights at 145. That's kind of what I'm getting at here. So I could see that happening as well. So yeah, those are some negatives. I know I kind of gave more positives than negatives, but my personal opinion on this is I'm kind of mixed. Okay, I hate to be Canadian and kind of impartial here, because I kind of look at it as I'm happy we're getting a more competitive fight than the Charles fight. I am looking forward to that. Like, I'm more intrigued by this than I was with the Charles fight, because again, we saw the first Charles fight. I know Charles would look better in the rematch. I said that in my early look preview, but I think ultimately he would have lost. But I think at least with Volk, the first fight was close, very close, razor close. And I think that who knows how the rematch is going to go, especially with, adding in the fact that this is short notice. But I think what this really boils down to for me, and why I do, I just said I'm going to stick it in the middle here. I actually do think this is a negative overall. And again, it comes back to something that I preach about in every single one of my videos. And that is that the UFC is doing far too many events. If they weren't so dead set on Islam headlining this card, they could have moved the Charles fight, or they could have done this fight next year and taken some time off. But because the UFC has a bad habit of booking locations first and then saying this fighter has to be on this card, they handcuff themselves, because we shouldn't have to get this fight now. If the UFC wasn't worried about that, if they had more flexibility in terms of moving fighters around and events around, you would move this fight to next year, you would promote the hell out of it, and it would be one of the biggest fights in UFC history. And now you've got this fight where, it's a great fight, but I just think they are really missing the boat here with the fact that it's happening on 10 days notice. I think that's a big thing. And this isn't the first time this has happened, right? We were supposed to have Dricus du Plessis against Israel Adesanya. The UFC was dead set on Israel Adesanya headlining the Sydney card. They didn't need to have Dricus have such a quick turnaround to take that fight. Now, granted, we got Sean Strickland and ended up being a crazy fight and Strickland winning the title, but I'm just saying that that could have easily been avoided, and they could have given Dricus the shot if they would have just delayed it a few months. But they couldn't do that because they handcuffed themselves to having the event, the location, and one fighter specifically on that event, and they're like, it has to be this way. So that's kind of my thoughts on this overall. I think that when we look back on this fight, regardless of how it goes, I think this is kind of a lose-lose situation for the fighters. For the fans, that's debatable, because again, I do think we're going to get a better fight here. I know we're going to get a better fight between Islam and Volkanovski, and I'm curious to see what happens. And let's hope that Volk's 100% healthy. Who knows? And that's another thing I should mention here. Eugene Behrman goes on this whole thing, Volkanovski's, coach over there at City Kickboxing, this whole thing about Dricus, I have my fighters fight injured. Well, this might backfire. I mean, this absolutely might backfire, because there's no guarantees if Volkanovski loses this fight that he's going to get an opportunity again to fight Islam. So this whole preaching, oh, our guys fight injured, well, it may backfire here, because Volk could go from being, one of the greatest featherweights of all time to one of the greatest fighters of all time. And now you're really taking a risk on 10 days notice with him moving up and potentially losing here to Islam. So that's another little tidbit I wanted to throw in here. And I don't have anything against Eugene Behrman, but I think the idea that you should fight injured isn't a great one, because I mean, it can really alter careers. Just look at TJ Dillashaw fighting Sterling. That was not even a competitive fight because Dillashaw was injured in the fight. We don't want to see that at all. So like I always do in these videos, I'm going to leave it up to you guys. What do you think? Do you think this is a lose-lose situation? Do you take some positives from the fact that this will be a better fight? Where do you guys stand on this? Let me know. Also, give me an early prediction for this fight. Like I said, I will do an early look preview on this matchup here soon. I will go into this one in depth. I know the fight's next week, but I'll try and get something up before the weekend. And yeah, just let me know your prediction. Let me know your thoughts on the fight being put together, because yesterday's video was just a quick reaction. Now we know this fight is, obviously official and everything else. So I want to get your thoughts on that. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, @Lynch on Sports. I'm James Lynch. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.